Hi, Church. Pastor Jeff here, back from a much-needed week of vacation, but glad to be back today with a Trinity check-in to check in with your reading of Mark for Lent. If you don't know it, we're doing a church-wide read-through of the Gospel of Mark for the season of Lent. We've done this every other year. We've been reading through one of the Gospels for Lent, and it has been good as always. It's just good to have an excuse to read something each day in the Bible, to have a little bit of direction in that, but it's also good to know that we're doing it as a community, and I've heard from a bunch of you who've been doing it, and I really appreciate that. So in fact, if any of you are reading through it, hit reply to this email or leave a comment on Facebook and let me know, just yes or no, whether you're doing it. It's nice to know. But if you have any thoughts, what struck you, how it's affected you so far, what's challenged you, or any questions you have, I would love to hear them. For today's check-in, I thought I would add a little extra that might help with that reading. We had decided to do this for Lent, and no sooner had we than I got an email from my alumni, my alma mater, Boston University, with a class for alumni from a beloved preaching professor who's about to retire on the Gospel of Mark. And I immediately said, sign me up, what good timing. And there's a couple tidbits that I wanted to share with you that probably aren't going to make it into a sermon, so I thought I'd share here so that you all would have that as you read through Mark 2. So one of them is about the nature of how Mark writes itself. Now, if I talk about a genre of writing, do you know what I mean? So like a fantasy novel is different than a science fiction novel, is different than a history novel, is different than well, you get the idea, right? And it's different styles of writing, and there are even little tropes, little patterns that writers use, like people who read mysteries all the time start to learn the tricks that mystery writers use, or romance is another genre like that. Well, there was a genre around the time of Jesus called apocalyptic, and it often uses a great contrast, a lot of light versus dark, good versus evil, uses big things to make sense of even the little things that happen to us. And if you want pure examples of it, the book of Revelation in the Bible is that kind of writing, and the second half of the book of Daniel is as well. Now, Mark isn't exactly apocalyptic writing, but you can tell he was influenced by it. So, one thing that challenges a lot of people reading Mark are all the stories about demons. And if you read them knowing that he's writing it, being influenced by this apocalyptic school of thought, philosophy, genre that's out there, it starts to make a little more sense. So for instance, one of the healing stories that we'll get to eventually is one we talked about in the last sermon series. Remember the father who said, I believe, Lord, help my unbelief? Remember him? Well, his son or daughter, I think it was son, was afflicted by a demon, and he would have shakes and jerks and foam at the mouth. I believe that's the phrase that he uses. It's something like that. And Mark says it like that this is a demon that needs exorcised, and Jesus comes and does so. Now, we know by today's science that it was probably epilepsy. That's the best guess. They didn't have the science to explain that. They didn't understand how that type of disease worked back then. But Mark, being influenced by this apocalyptic thing, what he wanted to say is that something bad is happening to this child, something evil, something that we don't know fully how to understand or explain is happening. And Jesus is the one who comes and saves. And so he tells the story as a demon. Now, see, it makes a little more sense when you read it through that lens and when you understand it like that. But you'll hear it in the way he talks about light and dark, good and evil, that kind of thing, too. So that's one thing I wanted to offer. The other one, now, this one is especially tasty. The kind of the front edge of biblical scholarship these days is realizing how much of our Bible is mimicking words that were used by the Roman Empire. So, maybe you remember that Mark begins with the phrase, the beginning of the good news, and so on from there, and it talks about Jesus Christ as Savior. there was a stone tablet that was discovered in ancient Greece. Now, this would have been Roman-controlled Greece, and I'll put it up here on the screen if you want to see it. I know how many of you are able to read ancient Greek, so have at it. But let me just tell you that one of the phrases that it uses is the beginning of the good news of Caesar Augustus. And it refers to Caesar Augustus as a son of God. I kid you not, refers to Caesar Augustus as son of God and as Savior. And many of the Greek words that are used in this mimic or mirror, or no, I shouldn't say mimic, that implies something. They are the same words that are used in the Gospel of Mark. Now, what the scholars are doing right now is they're finding all of these ancient Roman documents and finding phrases that were used and borrowed. Now, of course, we can't know the mind of Mark, who wrote this down 2,000 years ago, but it does seem to suggest that he had a political agenda. That he was writing to tell us about Jesus and to tell us the good news of Jesus. But part of the way he was doing it was to say, this Caesar Augustus guy, this Augustus guy who thinks he's the Son of God, he's not. Let me tell you who really is the Son of God. It would be like us borrowing a phrase for like, what's a phrase we use with our government? Hail to the chief. That's not a great one. I don't know. I can't think of anything specific here on the spot. But you get the idea. It would be like borrowing that and say, these senators, these congressmen, yes, they have a lot of power. And yes, it's important that we do all we can to engage them. But they're not the ones in control. Let me tell you who the real Son of God is. Let me tell you who the real Savior is. It's Jesus the Christ. That would seem to be part of Mark's message, hidden in the text from our modern eyes. So, know that that's in there. Now, we still are discovering some of those phrases that are borrowed like that, but it does make it interesting, and it does set the part. It gives the text a little more edge, I think. So as you read, keep that in mind, both the apocalyptic and the fact that Mark wants us to know that the powers of this world are nothing compared to the power of the real good news in Jesus. All right, let me know how it's going for you. I look forward to this Sunday. We're going to tell the stories of one of those healings in church this week, and I'm going to add some more detail on it too, and hopefully demonstrate what it can mean to us in our lives every day too, because this isn't just an ancient document. It's one that's still alive in us. All right, I'll see you soon, church. Enjoy the weather.